Hello and welcome back to my garage where, as promised in a previous video, I'm going to be running you through every single modification that I've made to my Alfa Romeo 4C so far. So we're going to go through everything one by one. I'll explain what the modification does if it's not blatantly obvious, as well as how much it costs. And I also want to run you through a couple other things that I plan on changing in this car in the very near future. Also, because I know you guys will ask, if you happen to have an Alfa Romeo 4C yourself, I will link everything that I can as far as parts are concerned down below in the description of this video. So if you see something that you're interested in, check the description box down below and hopefully it'll be linked. It's also very hot today, so pay attention to how I get sweatier and sweatier as this video goes on. So as you can see, here's the car. Specifically, it is an Alfa Romeo 4C Spider, the Spider aspect being the soft top removable roof, which I have actually yet to remove on my car, which I've owned for a little over a year now, mainly because I don't like driving it without the roof. Also, unlike the coupe variation, which has a different shape to the back, as well as the glass engine cover, you're going to find that the back of the car is left completely flat. You have some vents right there, so you can kind of see what's going on, but all you really see with the engine on a 4C anyways is a giant plastic engine cover that's not really that attractive to begin with. Whether or not you prefer the look of the coupe over the Spider with the 4C, it's a matter of opinion. I kind of change my mind and go back and forth every other day. Now, the color of the car is Giallo Prototipo, which is basically just yellow. It doesn't have any pearl effect to it or anything like that. And as far as I'm aware, in North America at least, this particular color was only available on the Spider variants of the 4C. You could not order a coupe in this color. I'm not sure if that's different in Europe. I believe it might be though. Either way, the first modification that I knew I wanted to make with this car was full body PPF. So everything that you see that's yellow, even the parts that are in carbon, it's very difficult to make out, but everything is covered in a thin layer of plastic, basically. That's what PPF is. And the reason why I wanted that is because I knew that this was a car that I planned on keeping long term, and that is ultimately the plan right now. And when the car has full body PPF, honestly, you don't have to worry about cleaning it. It's a peace of mind thing. And also with the plan of having this car on the track, anybody that's brought their car to the track knows that the front end of your car will take a little bit of a beating in terms of rubber and just debris in general being flung at the front of the car. So having that extra layer of protection, especially on a car like this where the paint is relatively fragile based on my experience with Alfa Romeos and a lot of Italian cars, that to me, full body PPF was definitely a must. The second cosmetic change that I've made to this car is of course the livery, which includes the blue and white stripe, the circle on the door, as well as the black side sill and the little Italian flag there on the shark fin. Now, the inspiration for this was mainly the 458 Speciale in red with the blue and white stripe. I've always been a big fan of that car. That to me is kind of like the dream Ferrari, and I felt like the 4C would be a cool platform to do something similar. So you can see you have the stripe all the way across the back of the engine cover, as well as here around the badge, which looks quite nice. And we figured we'd stop it right there rather than going all the way down. I think that's a pretty cool look. And of course that continues on the hood, goes around the emblem. It's finished off really nicely. And then we actually continued it on the front lip, which is something that I saw initially on the 488 Pista, which I thought, again, was a really cool detail, so I decided to incorporate it on this car. A lot of people ask about the circle. It's kind of just like an old race car thing. Normally you'd have a number inside, it'd kind of be interchangeable, but I like the idea of a blank circle, and I'm seeing more and more of these on Instagram. It seems to be a popular trend at the moment. And then the black side sill on the 4C, it's just a look that I really like, and I think it suits the shape of this car really nicely, so it just made sense. The Italian flag on the shark fin, pretty self-explanatory. With all of the livery and PPF being done by my friends at Second Skin, if you're in the GTA area or Ontario, Canada in general, be sure to go ahead and check them out if you need something done to your car. The third modification that I've made you wouldn't be able to see, and that is that the car has been ceramic coated, which, contrary to what a lot of people think, it's not so much for protection as much as it is for just making it much easier to clean the car. Obviously, there is a protective aspect to it in terms of avoiding little micro scratches. This car has full body PPF, so that's not a huge concern. All of those details would have been actually corrected before the PPF went on. But anybody that has had a ceramic coated car, or at least one that was done properly, knows that when you go to clean it, it basically cuts your wash time in half because everything just slides off the car really nicely. So again, because this was a car that I was planning on keeping, plus it's kept in the garage when it's not being driven. It's pretty much going to last the lifetime of the car, and again, it just makes my life a lot easier when I go to wash it. Modifications 4, 5, and 6 come in the form of little bolt-on carbon fiber bits that are ultimately just cosmetic. I'm not sure there's any true aerodynamic benefit to them, but they come from a company called Koshi Group, where you can see that I have this front lip here in gloss carbon fiber. It has some nice shape to it that kind of matches the front bumper, and I believe they make like 2 or 3 different styles for the 4C. This is the one that I like the best. It has this little shark fin end plate here, which I think looks quite cool. But mainly why I wanted the front lip is, one, because I think it looks cool and I really wanted to do the continuation of the stripe. It's a very minor detail, but I think it really makes the design of this car work quite nicely. Unfortunately, it's thin carbon fiber, it's not the strongest, and on my way up to the track 2 weeks ago, I actually got hit with a stray tire tread from a semi-truck. It hit my car and then 2 other cars behind me. It cracked my front lip, so I'm gonna have to get that fixed. At least I'm told it's fixable. It even cracked my license plate cover, which, believe it or not, I think that this license plate actually saved my front bumper, because if this wasn't there, it probably would have caused a lot more damage. Also, moving to the side, you're gonna find the other piece, which is these carbon fiber shark fins, which I just think look really cool. Again, kind of 458 Speciale-esque. And then the extra detail of the Italian flag on the fin is something that I just really like the look of. And the inspiration for that was honestly the Italian flag stripe that you have here on the Performante. I think that's a very cool detail. I know some people hate it, but I figured it would work really nicely on this car, and I think it has. And then again, number 6 on the very back, also from Koshi Group, is this carbon fiber diffuser, which basically just sits on top of the stock diffuser and adds some extra fins. It's actually matte carbon rather than gloss carbon. I'm not sure what the reasoning is, maybe heat. I don't think they actually make it in a gloss carbon. I know technically it doesn't match the rest of the car, but this is all matte black in this area, so it kind of blends in really nicely. It's just a very subtle thing, and I figured it was a cool little detail to have on the car. And for those that will ask, the mirror, this little vent that you only have on the driver's side, as well as the A-pillars and the halo on the back being in carbon, you can buy those aftermarket, but all of those actually came from the factory as options on this particular 4C. I also added these carbon fiber mud flaps only at the front. You can see how the tires line up when you have an aftermarket setup where they're pushed out. There's a lot of space right here for the front tires to just shoot rocks across the side of the car. So I figured it was a good idea to have some kind of mud flaps. The fact that they're actual carbon fiber does look quite cool, and ultimately it blends in really nicely because of the black side sill. So it's a little bit of protection, plus you don't really see it, which is kind of what I was going for. Which brings us to arguably my favorite change made to this car, and that is the wheels. These are fully custom made by a company called Augment Wheels, which for those of you guys that saw the custom wheels on my AMG GTR, it's the exact same company. Definitely check them out if you're looking for something unique for your vehicle. Either way, the inspiration for these wheels, like a lot of other things on this car, is kind of the whole Ferrari vibe that I think that this car has to a certain extent. It also kind of has some retro styling, and something I've always been a big fan of is taking like a classic older style of wheel that you never see anymore that would normally be significantly smaller, and then blowing it up to a modern size. So that's exactly what we did. We took like a Ferrari 308 or a Ferrari F40 rim. We blew it up to an 1819 setup, which is what this car is running, technically the same as the stock wheels on it. They're just a little bit wider and obviously changed the fitment up quite a bit. But the end result, I think, is something that looks really cool. It's definitely very unique, but it works with the overall design, especially with all the livery. I'm very happy with how they turned out. We opted for like a gloss gunmetal finish. I was kind of hesitant to do black. I didn't want to do silver. So this seemed like a nice compromise. And again, I think it looks really good. You can see you have the custom Alfa Romeo center caps, and then all of the lugs are in titanium as well. So they're not only lighter than the stock wheels, they look significantly better as well. Some people go a little bit bigger. They go for a 1920 setup. Some people even go smaller to have the lightest possible wheel. And I'm kind of toying around with the idea of maybe getting a 1718 setup just to see how much different that feels on track. But for now, these do the job really nicely. I think they look fantastic, and the fitment is pretty much perfect. That is a huge issue with the stock look of the Alfa Romeo 4C, especially at the rear wheels where they sit so deep inside the fenders. These are custom made, no spacers whatsoever, and the fitment, as you can see, is absolutely fantastic. And given that I was going to be changing up the suspension anyways, I really wasn't worried about changing the setup that much because it had to be changed around anyways. So even though these rims are the same 18-19 inch setup as stock, they're wider both front and back, so you have to go with new tires, and I wanted something stickier anyways. Ultimately, I decided on some tires from Bridgestone. These are Potenza RE71Rs, which honestly I've been really happy with. It is definitely more of a track-focused tire, as you can see. Probably not something you want to be caught out in the rain all that often with, although I have driven the car in the rain, and as long as you're careful, it's honestly not too bad. But most people aren't going to be driving these in the rain anyway, so it wasn't that big of a concern. On track, they're nice and sticky, and they're not too bad as a road tire either. For those that are curious about sizing, these ones at the rear are 265/35/19, and then at the front, I am running a 225/40R18. There's also been some tampering with the brakes. It's still running the stock rotors and calipers. I do plan on changing the rotors at some point in time, but I have actually changed out the brake pads as well as the brake lines for steel brake lines, both from a company called Terex, which honestly, it makes a big difference over the stock brake setup. And I would highly recommend it if you just want better brakes, and especially if you plan on tracking the car. Which brings us to the back of the car, where if you're familiar with the Alfa Romeo 4C, you'll notice something that is distinctively different, and that is the center exit exhaust rather than having the double pipes on either side, which I am really not a big fan of how those look. Now, what's kind of interesting about the 4Cs, it's one of the only cars from the factory that doesn't have any mufflers. So even when you change the exhaust, I don't think it increases the volume all that much, to be perfectly honest with you, but it will give you that little bit of extra noise if that's what you're looking for. This particular exhaust system is from a company called Centerline, which I believe is just a sub-brand of Magnaflow. This is their Nero Competition unit, if I'm not mistaken, where you can see it has black tips rather than chrome tips, which are also an option. And to go along with this kit, obviously it's just a short center exit exhaust, so technically it's louder just because there's less pipe to travel through. And you'll notice that the grille has to be swapped out, so you have this center exit piece, and then those grills have to be swapped out so you don't have the cutouts for the stock exhaust. Ultimately, it ends up looking like the car was supposed to be like this in the first place, and I just think it's a much better look in general. I decided on black pipes rather than chrome ones just because I kind of wanted it to all blend in at the back, and I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. Now, to go along with that exhaust, and this is something that I recently had put in the car, and I'm really happy that I made this modification. It's a Capristo 100 cell high flow cat. It was installed by the boys at European Automotive in Oakville. If you need something done to your car, servicing, parts, modifications, and you're in the GTA area, definitely go and check them out. Their info is linked down below. Either way, it makes a huge difference in terms of eliminating what is a gigantic restriction with the stock cats in the 4C. Definitely a little bit of a volume increase as well, but honestly, the car just seems to run smoother with the high flow cat. So even before changing the stock exhaust, if I had the option of only changing one, I would actually go with the high flow cats before changing the exhaust system. There's also been some modifications done to the suspension, the first of which is very inexpensive and honestly one that I would recommend if you have a 4C, and that is the Alfa Works steering blocks, which are basically like spacers that change up the angle of the suspension ever so slightly to improve the steering. So it gets rid of that little bit of a dead spot that you have in the steering from the factory. And again, it's one of those changes, inexpensive, you'll immediately notice a difference. The A-arms have also been changed, where the aftermarket ones are actually very similar to stock. The main difference is the actual bushing, which is made out of a harder nylon material, where again, from the factory, they kind of cheaped out on this. When you increase the power of the car, there's a little bit of play in the stock bushings, and because the tolerance is so tight on the nylon ones that are slightly larger, it's very difficult to actually drill out the stock A-arm to fit the new bushing, so you just replace the whole thing entirely. There's nothing wrong with the actual design. The new ones are a little bit nicer, of course, but it basically removes any play in the rear suspension when you increase the power of the car. Helps to stabilize things. Again, it made a really big difference. And then over to the left, you'll notice the Bilstein coilover adjustable suspension that I have installed. There's a little dial here at the bottom with 10 different settings, 1 being the softest, 10 being the stiffest. You have it front and back, and it makes a huge difference in terms of how the car handles and feels in general. overall, it's definitely a lot stiffer than the stock suspension, even in the softest settings. And then obviously once you get into the 8s, 9s, and 10s where it's really, really stiff, it changes the feel of the car completely. And again, if you're going to be tracking the car at all, this is a modification that I definitely think is worthwhile. Plus, it's just fun to play around with. And that pretty much covers all the mods on the outside of the car. Everything else is happening under the hood. So we're going to pop that really quickly. And this is kind of an interesting quirk of the 4C because it is ultimately a modern car and you don't see this that much. Here's a look at the key for those that are curious. We'll unlock the car. In order to pop the hood, you actually have to open the driver's side door, and then the release is right here in the door sill itself. So with the door closed, you have no way of popping the rear engine cover or hood or bonnet or whatever you want to call it. Close that up. And then the back hood is way heavier than I think it should be considering how light this car is. And as you can see, there's no struts to hold this up. You actually have to use this little thing right here, which is kind of old school. So I'm going to put you down for a second. Do that. And as you can see, that's what it looks like inside the engine compartment of an Alfa Romeo 4C. Like I said earlier in the video, it's just this large Alfa Romeo 4C plastic engine cover, and underneath all you see is a bunch of wires anyway. So even if you remove that, it's not all that attractive. And I think you need to have that there for the sake of heat shielding. Obviously, you can't see all that much in the engine bay of the 4C. Everything's pretty jammed in there. So without significant disassembly, you don't have the greatest visibility, but I'll give you guys a brief explanation of what's been done here. First things first, see that red hose back there? There's a hose kit, which you need to run when you're increasing the boost. Obviously, there's gonna be more heat to go along with that as well. So the hoses are basically just stronger than the stock ones would be. It's also running a BMC high flow air filter, which is another pretty straightforward modification for a lot of performance cars. It also has a significantly larger intercooler for, of course, better cooling, which is down in this area right there. You can't really see it from here, but if you run around to this little intake at the driver's side, you'll see the very large intercooler behind this very open grille. And honestly, I was really impressed with the cooling on this car, having it on track for the first time. Temperatures never went anything above normal, even in 12-lap sessions, which I was really impressed with. Also, the car is running an aftermarket tune. The ECU is right here. These two little things plug in at the top. And like I said in a previous video, I'm guesstimating that the car is currently making about 300 horsepower, but there are some other things that I've done to the car that I wasn't initially planning to do, like the intercooler. So I think there's maybe a little bit more power in it. It's gonna need a retune. I'll definitely update you guys on when that happens. What's also kind of interesting about the 4C is while there are a bunch of elements that you wouldn't expect to have on a car at this price point, like a carbon fiber monocoque, which is just unheard of for a car that costs this much, there are a bunch of things about it that are extremely cheap and just really need improvement, and they're fairly inexpensive things to fix. In this particular car, it's excessive engine movement, which maybe sounds a little bit crazy, but there is a lower engine bushing as well as a lower engine mount that have both been swapped out. They're basically $40 parts, but it makes a big difference. And that pretty much concludes all of the modifications that I've made to this car so far. But if we move to the inside, there are a few things that I want to change and I'm working on as we speak. Now, I had this car on track for the first time about 2 weeks ago. A lot of you guys might have seen the video. I will admit that I've never really been a big fan of the steering wheel, so that might get changed. I've seen a few people with some solutions for a new steering wheel setup on the 4C. That's not priority though. Number one priority is the driver's seat, because what I learned with this car is it's a lot faster than I gave it credit for, and it also has way more grip than I was expecting it to have. And this seat, while it's great for the road, it's relatively comfortable considering how thin it is. As you can see, it has next to no bolstering whatsoever. So that downhill left-hander that you guys saw in the video, you can't really tell, but I was having it was a monumental effort to try and stay in my seat. I was basically pressing my entire right leg against the inner part of the center console to try and stay in place. So a race seat is definitely in the works right now. I kind of am in love with the idea of just changing the driver's side because I kind of like the look of the mismatched seat. And to go along with that, I also want to do a harness bar as well as a 6-point harness to kind of just help hold myself in place. Plus, it just looks really cool. I've always wanted a 6-point harness in a car, never had it before, planning on doing it here in the 4C. I'm kind of thinking a blue or a red seat for the driver's side would look really cool. Again, just to have the mismatched seat thing. If you have any opinions on that, leave it down below in the comments. But basically, seat, harness bar, and 6-point harness is what's next for this particular car. Anyways, guys, that's it for this video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, be sure to support it with a like. If you have any suggestions or comments on the car in general, whether it's cosmetic or performance related, I'm always curious to hear what other people say because I've done a lot to the car. I'm really happy with how it looks, but it's always nice to get a second opinion, whether it's positive or negative. So let me know what you guys think down below in the comment section. Also, if you have any suggestions for other videos you'd like to see from me on this channel, feel free to leave those down below in the comments as well. If you're not subscribed to the channel already and don't want to miss out on weekly videos almost on car related things, I'm not even sure what the next video is, make sure you hit that subscribe button along with the little bell notification so you get notified when the next new video goes live. And other than that, guys, thank you so much for watching and we'll see you in the next one. I'm so sweaty.